Leaders and managers, this is for you as our staff start to come back in to our organisations. Hello, happy Tuesday. This is Darren Roberts, Master Trainer at Impact Training Corporation and the Abundance Accelerant. Welcome to the Tuesday Tickle and Tick show number 57. Today, manage tasks, lead people, and what not to do. We're in a time where many industries have been restricted with their growth and sales opportunities, some staff not being working in their normal environments. And now as that's starting to ease and staff will start to come back into our organizations, the managers and the leaders will start to drive outcomes and results and sales, which is great because that's getting us back to a little bit of normality. But be careful what you're managing. I'm going to give you a real life example of what not to do that happened to me that you won't replicate, because if you do, it'll hurt performance, it'll hurt culture, and it'll hurt yourself as a leader. Remember, we manage tasks and we lead individuals. That's the difference between, one of the differences between a manager and a leader. So back in 2008, I had probably the worst leadership example of my career. I was in an organization that I was passionate about. I'd been there for 7 years and grown through the business to a senior role within that organization. And the organization was bought out. It was about to change hands, and as a senior person in that organization, it was my opportunity to communicate to the team and do a handover to the new organization, which I was going to continue to be a leader in, which was exciting. And it was the day, we had a big party organized to celebrate the changeover, and it was the day. So I was driving home, and I was driving home to have a shower, get changed, and get ready for this party and this celebration. And the phone rang, and it was my wife on the end of the phone. I could hear water in the background, and I could hear incredible screams that I will never forget. And those screams were my son Blake. He was about 1.5 years old, and he pulled a hot pot of tea off the bench in the kitchen, and it went all over his face and all over his body. And my wife rushed him into the cold water of the shower, and while of course it was the right thing to do, she's a nurse, she knew what she was doing, but of course it was painful for him. Kirsty had already rung the ambulance and they were on their way. And I remember driving home, rushing home, and I happened to be behind the ambulance that was also rushing to my home to look after my son. I pulled into the driveway. Oh my goodness, it was chaos. Anyway, he had 3rd-degree burns to a significant part of his body, and he was in hospital for weeks on end. In hospital, he was in isolation so that he didn't get infections. And man, he was a trooper. But it was a tough time. It was a tough time. We had our daughter, who was a couple of years older. She didn't know what was going on. Kirsty went through some tough times through that period as well. And this organization was a very driven sales organization that I was working with. And at the end of every month, we did this thing called closeout, which a lot of you are familiar with. Last day of the month, work crazy hours, really push hard to get past target and as far past target as we could. And it was the day before closeout. And Blake had been in hospital for a little while, but it was a really bad day for the family. You know, a couple of weeks down the track, as he had 3rd-degree burns, and he was getting them dressed every day, and it was painful, and he was in isolation. And Kirsty and my daughter had a bit of a rough day. And I decided that I couldn't go into closeout. Now, for those that knew me and know me back then, the closeout was everything to me. It was a great day, hot heaps of energy, really important day for the business. And it was the new national sales manager that I communicated with. And I rang her, and I started to tell her about what happened. I started to tell her that, listen, unfortunately, right now I've got to choose my family over going into closeout. I've made other arrangements, I've got other staff that will be there to drive it. I actually couldn't finish the conversation. broke down a little bit. I couldn't finish the conversation. I said, listen, I'll ring you back. I took some deep breaths, went outside, rang her back and explained the situation and said, unfortunately, I can't come in to close out tomorrow. I've got to look after my family. And she was pretty short over the phone, and closeout was successful. Those that I'd put in place did a good job. But after 7 years of progressing through that business, I was never looked upon by that individual the same again. I was always looked upon as someone that doesn't put business as number one priority. Now, many times I do, but in that case, it was the right thing not to. And from that point forward, she made my leadership really difficult because of the thought process that she had. And of course, the connection that we had was challenged as well. And in less than a year, I'd resigned and I'd moved to another organization. So I tell you this story because be careful of managing task and making sure you're leading people. We want both. I'm not saying one without the other. We want both. But remember what your teams have been through over the last 5 or 6 weeks, and so have you as a leader. So make sure when people are coming back, you're connecting with that person, and hopefully you have been over this time as well. You're making sure they're okay. You're finding out what they need to perform at their best. Is it straight back into the office, or is it a couple of days in the office and a couple of days working from home? You know, we all know the old school of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Well, it's still legitimate, isn't it? So my warning to you is, yes, we want to drive success. And a lot of you have been going through a tough time financially as managers and business owners. So the instinct is to go, all right, back on the horse. Let's go even harder for results. Now, the balance can occur. We can drive results, but only if we look after your individuals first. So make sure you're having those conversations. Make sure you're building those connections, and not just showing you care, but actually caring. Not just pretending that you're interested, but actually going and be interested. Find out about that person, care about that person, and then that earns you the right to drive the outcomes. But it also allows you to drive outcomes that are in line with your team members. So through your conversations, what's important to them? They've probably been going through financial hardship as well. So how much money do they want to earn in a certain amount of time? They may have greater drive than you have for results. They might want to increase those results to get them back on, to get them to pay the mortgage again, to get them back on their feet with their investments. So then when you are driving, then you're talking to in a language that matches their drive, not just your drive. So hear me strong, manage task and lead people. That's one example of mine that was a bad leadership example. Most of my career, I've had outstanding leaders that, yes, drive very strong results, and hopefully that's been me as well, with the balance of loving my people and understanding my people and caring for my people. So a little bit of a word of warning, the desire to get in there and to really drive your team and maybe lead with the stick rather than the carrot is going to be strong, because you've got to recover quickly. But please make sure you're doing the balance of having empathy and that connection with the individual. Lead them in a manner that inspires them and is the outcomes that they're driven to, and manage task, but more importantly, lead people. You guys have a good Tuesday. We'll see you next time for the Tuesday Tickle and Tick. Bye for now.